Hello, welcome to Country Stitchers. I'm Liz, and Deb's still away this week. So I'm going to use this time to answer the inquiries from our viewers about doing a PEYOTE Scissor Fob demonstration. This is something I taught myself how to do, must be maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. I had been at Salty Yarns on a retreat. Oh gosh, now that I think about it, it's probably closer to 6 years ago. The very first kit I ever picked up to learn from is this kit right here. It was Lamsey Divey Needle Minder by Fern Collections. Everything that you need in order to complete this is in the kit. The instructions are very clear. I also did some research on YouTube, and that was helpful. I had one little problem with this. The magnet for this needle minder is inside when you complete it, and it wasn't like the kind of needle minder I use on my cross stitch fabric where I have one behind the fabric and one in front. So I thought, well, I'll just add a magnet to the back and use it that way. Well, after I started doing that, I started noticing there were little pieces of almost glittery glass around my stitching area, and I realized that the glass beads, the magnets were so strong, the glass beads were breaking here at the base of my needle minder from where the two magnets connected through the fabric. So I mended that with a piece of felt, and now I know that that has to be done very intentionally so as not to have any kind of hard connection between the two magnets. But it works great as a needle minder, so it's a lot of fun. And its name was Lamsey Divey, and it had a friend, as most of the Fern Ridge collection pieces do, and that was my first scissor fob. And this has a lot of fringe on the bottom, and then a charm that hangs from it, if you can see the little lamb. And I like that. I think it's cute. It was a challenge, and I've since bought several of their kits, and they're a little more challenging as I go. Today, however, we're going to look at a kit that, a pattern that I designed to use as a means of instruction. This is one of my designs. I did this at the holiday. I had a lot of fun with this. And the one we're going to be doing today has a diamond pattern in it. It's quite simple. I'll show you what the PDF page looks like. If you want this, you can email me and I'll just send you a copy of this file. It's kind of lost on the huge piece of graph paper that I have. But it's just 5 diamonds. I did them all individual colors. So I have 5 colored diamonds on mine, and then a background color. And you bead just up to the red stop point on the pattern, and from there you decrease 1 row at a time for 8 rows, and you're done with the fob. Now, I did want to show you that after I created this in PDF, I'm not very familiar with that process. So I added the outline to my actual pattern that I was using with a pencil that follows that row up to the red stop point and then across to the top of the 8 beads and down. So when you receive this, if you ask for the PDF file, just add that with a pencil, and that gives you the actual shape of your pattern. It makes it a little easier to follow while you're beading. Now, there's 2 ways you can read a pattern. Before I go into that, though, I just wanted to take a moment and show you what is in the drop-down box as a means of explanation for what you'll have to have on hand if you want to try to stitch this. You'll need your beads, of course. You can see I have a background color. That's my cream color bead. And then I just have 5 different Delica bead colors that reminded me of spring, and I thought looked good together. And those are each of my diamonds. And then this first container contains the bicone beads, or the checked glass and Swarovski beads that I'm going to put on my fringe, and then my lobster clasp. And that's basically everything to do this from tip to tail. Pardon my voice. I actually videoed this. This is my third video. I thought it would be okay to video yesterday, but I was still at a point in this cold where I absolutely could not move air through my nose no matter what I tried. And when I went back and reviewed it, I thought, no way. We're going to do this again tomorrow when I feel a little better. So, before we move on, the rest of the things you'll need your thread. And this comes in a couple of different varieties. This is probably the least expensive and easiest to purchase. Comes several spools to a pack. You can get multicolor. I like to try to get a little darker color than white. It just isn't quite as visible unless you're doing something with white, in which case that's fine. This has white in it, and you can see from the side of this peyote fob that the white does not stand out. So that blended in fairly well. And you can see the white on the edge of this one as well. I might have used a light tan if I'd had it for this one, but I used what they sent with it, and the one that was included with that was white. Additionally, I mentioned the lobster clasp. I like to use this, Hildy and Joe. There's 8 to a package, and these are 20 millimeter. I really like that size. It will allow you to attach it to just about any size scissors or anything else you might want to put your fob on. You'll need needles, of course, and this is what I like to use. It's a size 10 John James ballpoint bead embroidery needle. There's 6 needles to a pack, and I keep these on hand. Not only do I use these for my peyote, but Deb and I use these also for anything that we're doing that might be 40 count over 1. It makes it so easy. I'll use it over 2 as well on 40 count. Sometimes I'll even use it on 36 count. Just depends on what my rhythm is and what I'm stitching. And I'm using these now on my iStitch band sampler for our guild. So the ball point is what makes the difference for that higher count thread fabric. It doesn't stick into the fabric as quickly, so you can position it from behind a little bit easier without separating your threads in your fabric. The other thing I like to use to mark my pattern is either a highlighter strip, which I use this highlighter tape, and this has a really low adhesive point, so it's like putting a post-it note on. I just fold the tip of this down so it gives me a tab to lift up on, and then I just take it up and down and place it and replace it on my pattern as I move. You'll find that's pretty important if you're doing a larger project or a project with multicolors, because the rows on peyote are not square, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And the final thing that I use when I'm doing these is a Quickstart card from Deb Moffit-Hall. This Quickstart peyote card is irreplaceable. The toughest part of doing any peyote piece, in my mind, is the actual start of the project. And because it has half steps in it, it makes it a little difficult to get those rows placed for the first 3 or 4. And once you do that, then you can remove the card and you're good to go. But I always reach for this. In fact, I keep them in all my beading projects. She makes these for different size beads also. But right now I'm using the size 11 Delica bead start card. You get 3 when you purchase it, and you also get some nice directions as to how to do the beading and how to make the turns, which is really nice. So I encourage you, these are online. You can find them very easily. Just search either Deb Moffit-Hall or Quickstart Peyote. That'll also be in our information box under the video when I'm done. So back to our pattern. Take a quick look at how it's read. This is what I used for this. It's a simple pattern, so I didn't write out the count form of the pattern. The count form would read something like, the first row would say 8B for background color, or 8-1 if you number the colors. And the next row would say 2B, 1C, 4B. And that's this row that has 2 background beads, 1 colored bead, and then 4 background beads. And then you step out to the 8 row again. So all the way up your peyote piece, you reduce each row by 1 bead because they're half steps. They sit down inside each other. I'll show you what that looked like. I did this piece here as an instructional piece for our guild. It's just a little thread spool that I designed. It just simply uses the same Delica beads on the little fringe at the bottom. And I let people learn how to do the little picot turns and ends on the beads. And starting with this bottom row, you'll see it's all white. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 background beads. And the next row you introduce 4 more background beads. And then on your third row in this pattern, you introduce the actual spool of the thread, and there's 3 of those beads right at the very bottom there next to my thumbnail. So this is the way it reads if you were to put it into a written format with a count. The first row is 6A, and the A is the background color. The second row is 4A, which again is the background color. I'm sorry, I said 6, that's 5. Then the third row is 1 background bead, 3 of your spool color beads, and then 1 more background bead. So you can read it this way and not have to look or manage that pattern at all. Or you can use the pattern and work your way out. If it's a complicated piece, I tend to like to use this written format and just check off each row as I go. The only difficulty there is if you have a mistake in the pattern as you're going, you are not as likely to see it until you compare your piece to the picture. So I try to eyeball the piece that I'm making and just make sure that it visually makes sense as I work on it. And it does happen often that you'll come across a mistake in your pattern. I'm going to set aside the pieces that I showed you, and we'll get started on this. We're going to do a simple fringe at the bottom. I'm going to start by showing you how to load the card. This is just an example of my work off of the card after I had done 8 rows. At that point, you can take it off after 3 and you've got all of the foundation you need. I tend to like to leave it on because it's a nice way to hold on to your piece with that card, but it is very easy to take off. And this one I worked right up to the start of the second diamond. That's what that blue bead is there, the bottom of the second diamond. So we'll set that aside. Excuse me. One of the keys to working with these cards is that you need to keep your card closed while you're working on it. If you don't keep it closed, your beads will fall through the template and then you have to feed them back through that bottom row again. But we're going to start with a threaded needle. If you're just starting your entire project, generally I use about 4 to 5 feet of thread. It's a little cumbersome at first, but it doesn't take long before you're where you need to be. At this end of the thread, we're going to add what's called a stop bead. And all you have to do is put a bead on your needle, run it down to the bottom. And when you get a couple of inches away, you're going to want a little tail on here at the end of your project so that you can anchor this into your work. So I usually leave 6 to 8 inches. All you do is after you've loaded your bead, just take your needle and go back through your bead in the opposite direction. And once that bead is on, it doesn't slide without a lot of tension on it. So the only way to slide it after you've put it on is to put your needle under the thread on the outside of the bead, and then take a hold of your bead and slide that thread out, and then you can slide your bead up or down or off. In this case, I'm just going to tighten it down again so that we're ready to bead. This is a little difficult trying to film this, so bear with me. I have to keep watching and making sure that I'm in the camera. So you come up through the bottom of your card in that bottom right hole, and you slide your thread through until you come to your stop bead. Then you go down through the hole that's to the upper left of that previous hole and come out in the first bead slot, which is the rectangle with the arrow cut at the bottom. If you look at that, you'll see that there's a little point at the bottom of each of these rectangles. That's to aid you in putting your needle through after your bead is set, and I'll show you in this first pass what I'm talking about. So now your thread has come up through the bottom right hole, down through the upper left hole, and then back through to the front through the first bead slot. Pick up your first bead, which in this case is a background bead for the first row, and at an angle lay your needle into that little arrow cut at the bottom, tip it up, and it slides right into the next bead slot. It's almost impossible to miss. I say that having done it a couple times myself. But then pull your thread and you'll hear that bead when it snaps into that guide. Pops right down into that track. Again, you're holding your card closed so the bead won't fall through on this first row. Pick up your second bead, lay it at an angle into that little arrow cut at the bottom, point it to the top, bring it out the next bead slot. You always have your thread coming through the bead that you're about to position. So my thread's at the front, I load my bead. Again, I go at an angle, I lay my needle against that bottom corner or point, and I bring my needle up through the next hole. The only thing you need to be careful of, if you're using a beading needle that came with a kit, those tend to have a point on them. It is easy to kind of poke your way through the paper sometimes, so just make sure you're guided into the next square before you give a lot of pressure to it. If you see two beads come through into one spot, that means you probably loaded your bead before you went into the next spot. Again, give a quick tug and that'll pop into the hole. All you have to do, it's very forgiving, is just back your thread out of your needle, pull it through, and your bead will come out. Again, my bead is ready to go because my thread's coming out that next slot. I've got 4 loaded. I need 8 total. I find this as relaxing as stitching. Now we're up to 6. Seven. And now our final bead. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is 8. Now, on the end of your row, go ahead and continue through to the next bead slot just like you have been. The difference being, that's the one thing that happens sometimes, is my thread gets caught around the card. After you've popped that into position, you're going to rotate your peyote card. So now you're coming back on the second row, and you go through your bead as though that were your bead slot, because it is, before you add the first bead on that row. So now I'm ready to add the 7 beads to the second row. This is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 7th bead position. Let me just show you here. We're going to encounter our first colored bead on the pattern now. Once you bead over to the left on the first row, you turn your card, and now you're going to be beading back to the right. So we're going to do 2 background colors, then our first diamond color, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 background beads. So 2 background, 1 diamond, 4 background on that next row. I load my bead when it's in this bead spot, and I go through the next bead, and again this pops it right down in between the 2 beads into that half step. My second background bead, and now a colored bead. I'm just going to reach down here and grab a purple on this one and make this first diamond purple. And that is about as complicated as this process gets. The only exception to what we've been doing is the turn that occurs when you're on an odd count row and you don't have a supporting bead to come through, and I will show you that. And that amounts to a very simple loop using 5 beads as the basis for your turn. And once you've gotten that turn down, the rest of it is all repetitive in this process where you're doing a one-dimensional project. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now the 3rd background bead on the other side of our colored bead, and our 4th. And now we finished our second row. Okay, now we're going to turn this and we've come through our 3rd row. Let's look at our pattern. Going back to the left now, is 1, 2, 3, 4 background beads, then 2 diamond beads, and then 2 background beads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, and 2. This will be our first. Sometimes this corner can look a little strange if you don't line them up, but that one went on nice and straight. Again through the bead, and then load your bead. 2, 3, 4. And now I have 2 colored beads to expand that diamond image in the fob. 1, 2, my thread got caught around that bead. There we go. And now I have 2 background beads. 1. Now, you see here, I do not have a bead to anchor in, to go through, to add this end bead. So what you do is you go down, this is that turn I was talking about. You go down a row, so you're bringing your thread from the 3rd row at an angle down through those next 2 rows. And when you come out the end, you load a bead, turn your card, you go back at an angle through the top 2 of those 3 beads. Again, you're still looking at that 1 row of 3. And this is going to pull a bead up alongside and finish out that row. But now obviously you're not at a place to start beading because you're past where your first bead would be. So you're going to turn around. This is that turn I told you about. You're going to come down a row and come back at an angle into this second bead in the middle of those 5. So you just come at an angle and you only go through 2 beads. The bottom one and the next one. Not through the top bead. You just come out next to it. So now when I pull this snug, you'll see that my thread is sitting outside those 2 beads, this one and this one. Now I'm going to drop down into this turn, come through this bottom bead, back through the top, and I'm ready to start the first bead in my 4th row. So it's the turns on the odd count rows that cause you to not have a bead to anchor into. So when you encounter that, that's how you add that end bead. So I'm going to bring that bead out, or excuse me, my thread out through that bottom bead. Give it a little tug. I hold my beads on my card together between my first and, or between my middle and thumb fingers, and I give a tug just to kind of pull that thread taut through those beads. Now, I want to position myself for the first bead in that 4th row. So I go through that first bead, and now I'm ready to pick up the first bead for my 4th row. Well, let's look here, because we're on our way back on the 4th row. We've gone left on the 1st, right on the 2nd, left on the 3rd. Now we're coming back on the 4th row. So here we're going to do 1 background bead, 1 diamond bead, 1 background bead, 1 diamond bead, and then 3 background beads. So it's 1, 1, 1, 1, and 3. Starting with the background. So 1 background bead, 1 diamond bead, 1 background bead, 1 diamond bead, 1. Normally I'll sit with this right in front of me. I've got it stretched out in front of me now, so I don't have it positioned like I usually do, but it doesn't normally get quite so caught up on my card. And then I have 3 background beads. One, 2, and 3. Okay. Now we're ready to go back. This would be our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th row. Let's count it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to have 1, 2, 3 background beads, 1 diamond bead, 2 background beads, 1 diamond bead, 1 background bead. So it's 3, 1, 2, 1, 1. So 3 background, 1 diamond bead, 2 background beads, 1 diamond bead, 1. And here again, you don't have an anchor, so you're going to go out through this bottom bead. So there's 3 beads involved there. Here's where you turn your card. You add your last background bead for that row. Go at an angle out through the 2 beads in that 5 bead group that you're working with. And this is the 5 bead group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are now here. having come out the bottom, added the bead, gone through to the top. Now we'll position ourselves here to go through those two, placing our thread between the center bead and the end. We'll come out the bottom bead. And now we're ready to go through the last bead on that row that we added in that maneuver and start our even count row on our way back. Let's look at our pattern one more time, see where we are. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows complete. We're ready to start our 6th row. Our odd rows are always on the end. Our even rows are always in that second column. So we're in the second column, headed back on the 6th row. And again, we've turned our card. This would have been the original position. We've turned our card to go back the 6th row, which if you look, we have 3 beads on the diamond. 1, 2, 3. This will be our, excuse me, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 beads, I'm sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This recessed bead is our 6th row. So we're going to have 1 background bead, 1 diamond bead, 1 background bead, 1 diamond bead, and 3 background beads. So it's a repeat of this row, number 4. So 1 background bead, and I don't have any more purple beads out, so I'll add a few to my tray. Diamond bead, background bead, oh, okay, here's something for us to look at. Sometimes this happens when you're drawing your thread through. I've split my thread with my needle here, and that's why this bead isn't sliding down into place. So what I do is I come back out through that bead, making sure that the thread's at the bottom and I don't split it again, because that makes it very difficult. But I bring that thread back out, and now you'll see a little more clearly where this happened. I usually just try to put my finger inside this loop and turn it to where I find just the intersection of the threads, and then I can see where my thread's gone through. And if you can see it clearly enough to go back through the actual thread, one more try. sort of see how that fiber slides apart there. Then you can bring your thread back through. Looks like there's still a tiny little connection between those two threads. Let me double check that. If you can't get it on the first try, it's easier to just slip the thread out of your needle. Draw it through and rethread. Otherwise, you're going to spend a good amount of time trying to get through that fiber. And I like this little needle threader that was given to us a while ago, because it's one of the few that will go through the eye of my beading needles. And these can be, they're a much smaller eye than the cross stitch needles. So I really appreciate this. And it has a light on it that you just saw. Makes it really nice. So now we've gotten that snafu undone. Bead's still threaded. Go back through here. And now my second color bead goes right here. And now 3 background beads. Now at this point, you could take the card off if you choose to. When you get to a few rows, something that you have, you know, enough to handle, you can take the card off, or you can leave the card on. I'm going to turn around here. I want to show you again. I like to make sure that my thread and my beading is even. So I'll take a hold of my piece and I'll give a little firm tug on that thread as I pull against it with my right hand, and just kind of move those beads up and down between my fingers and get them to just lay flat, stretch out a little bit. Keeps you from having any uneven spaces in the tension on your thread. That was just kind of a learned thing. I have to be careful not to over tighten it, because sometimes you'll draw it in at the top a little bit, but you can always just wiggle it back out if you do that on accident. So right here, we're ready to turn and go back. Again, we need this first bead, and we're at 1, 2, 3, 4 background beads, 2 color beads, and 2 background beads. And I know that only because I did this myself and have stitched it a couple of times. So I can look at the pattern now without having to look at the actual pattern and know what I need to add. So again, still that simple process. Go through the bead before you load your bead on. We need one more background bead here. And I'm going to check my pattern just to make sure that I didn't. Let's see, we're on the left side. Okay. I think that last bead should have been a colored bead. Yes. Okay. So, don't know the pattern as well as I thought. This is where that next diamond comes in. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 background beads, 2 color beads, it's 2 background beads, 1 colored bead, 1 background bead. So we need to remove that 1 background bead. I'm just going to go back through this one, and I try to stay away from the thread so that I don't separate the thread with my needle. That was easy, that worked. I'll pop right off there. Now I'll just pick up another color for the next row. Let's go with the peach color. So this goes here in the third spot. That's the bottom of our next diamond. Then our background. And then 2 purple diamond beads in a row. And then finally our background. And again, we're going to go down at an angle. So we can add that end bead. We're going to turn it. Come back through at an angle. Come out the top. Now we're dealing with those 5 beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We turn here, we go through 2. Come out between that and the end. Now we come out the bottom of those 2 at the side so that we can just reposition our thread, excuse me, to add our bead onto this row. Now we're ready for that next even counted row. Okay, so we have 1 diamond here for the beginning, or excuse me, 1 colored bead here for the beginning of our next diamond. And we have this diamond 1 bead from being completed. So we have a background bead. Another background bead. Then we have the last of our purple diamond beads. Now at this point, we're going to have a background bead, 2 color beads, and a background bead. Background, 2 color beads, our next diamond. Now, as I'm putting these last 3 on, I just want to mention, because of how these stitches step and the beads step to one another in half increments, you don't get a really clear linear design. You can't make a real simple circle. There we go. You can imagine if you wanted to draw a circle, you're going to hit these beads to make your line, but every time you hit a bead, it jumps a half space up or down. So I found in doing my own designing that that's kind of challenging. There's only, the larger you make your piece, the easier it is to get those dimensions and that exactness. But when you're dealing with something only 8 columns wide, well, in this case 15, if you count all the beads, it's very difficult to get that kind of precision. So just remember that what looks obvious, until you're used to knowing about how these beads relate to each other in this half step, it's not as obvious as it might look. For instance, I totally forgot that this bead here came down into the last double row of beads here. So it's not quite as clear cut when you look across a row as you might think it is. That's why I like to use these highlighters for positioning. Now we've finished that one row, we can come up here and lay it down for the next set of 5 rows that we do. You continue on up. At some point you're going to want to remove this from your card. I did remove mine already after this point to show you this is what it looks like when you've beaded your first diamond and you're at the last row. And I could continue now using a needle on this thread and continue beading holding this in my hand. I want to show you how to remove it from the card at this point, and then I have another piece done at a different stage for us to look at the decrease. You continue doing what we're doing with those turns that we were making until you get to the top line, the last full row of beads, which is your first full row of background after you finish the last colored bead in your design. The next row is your full row of background color, and that's your last row. The next row, as you can see, is 1 bead less, 1 bead less, 1 bead less, all the way up to the last bead. And this is where we will come out. We'll add a couple of decorative beads and then our lobster clasp, and then tie it off and anchor it in here. I'll show you how to do that, and then I'll show you how to come into the bottom, anchor your thread, and add some fringe on this end of the piece. And I'm sorry that my cold is coming and making me sound a little foggy here. I'll put in a cough drop, see if I can get rid of that. Now, this is the piece that I've continued to work on. So I'm going to take this piece and set it aside after I show you how to remove it from the card. It is so simple. I don't know how Deb figured this out, but clever, clever. You've got your stop bead. So what you do is you put your needle between your thread and your bead like I showed before. So a little bit feisty here. Once you get it there, you just kind of work that bead right to the end. Now you have nothing holding your thread there. You simply lift that thread off the bottom of the piece. You can go every couple of stitches and pull it out. It's just straight through that one bottom row. And then your piece lifts right off the top. Isn't that amazing? That is so awesome. Let's look at that one more time. I'm going to go ahead and take this other piece off of my card. I'm going to take my thread off. This is the piece we're going to look at how you decrease when you get to the top, because that's where we are on this one. thread my needle. That's better. Now I don't sound like I'm all muffled. Draw that through. And then I'll show you one more time. I have a spring on the top, or excuse me, the top part of this thread where I had my needle off. I really like these. They're in most of the beading magazines, beading websites. I believe I even saw these in Joann's the other day, hanging with their bead items. So I keep those on hand. Keeps my beads from coming off. So this is where we're going to start at the top with our decrease, but let's take it off the card now. Again, insert your needle between your thread and your stop bead and just draw that right off your thread, right off the tail. And then slide your needle under the thread on the bottom of your card between your beads and pull that through. I go every couple of beads. And now it just lifts right off the top. I have had my pack of 3 cards for years. They're amazing. So now, what I want to show you is how you decrease as you bead. If I were looking at my pattern now, I would be getting ready to start right here with this first row of the decreasing beads. This is the row that I'm sitting on, this full row of background color. Now I'm going to do this row of background color that's 1 bead less, and I'm going to continue on for 8 rows. So I don't want to add a bead here, and I don't like to see my thread outside these beads. So what I do is I come down a row and I go through that bead, I actually go at an angle through those 2 beads so that I move over 1 row. I pull the thread through. It's going to come out in the middle of my piece, right there, in 2 rows. And all I want to do is work my thread back up so that I'm coming through this bead right here instead of from out here. So my thread is here. I'm going to come up to this bead, go through it, and then come right back through that top bead. So I'm going to pick this bead up, and here's where you're going to manipulate your piece a little bit to lift that bead. Might take a couple of tries, but I'm going to bring my needle through that bead and watch where my thread goes. Okay, can you see it there? My thread's going to come right up along that gutter between the rows, pull right down in snug, and pop in through that hole. You won't see my thread anywhere on the surface. And now I come up into that first row where I'm going to decrease. So this is my first decrease. And I'm ready to go and add the second row. So your first decrease is to not add a bead. And your row then starts here. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beads. So I'm going from 8 to 6 because I am using that next inset row as the first decrease. So 1, 2, 3. As we speak, I'm cooking in the kitchen. Aren't I magical? I have not cooked a roast in so long. I decided today was the day to do it. Thought we were going to get together with my daughter and her family tomorrow, but we haven't been able to connect. So I decided rather than do a big ham tomorrow, I'd put a roast on today and take tomorrow off. My husband's involved in a service in the morning till shortly after noon time, so that'll be nice to already have that roast done. There. Now you can see we've come in 1, 2, 3 steps. Now here again, I don't want to see my thread go this direction across the piece. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to go through that bead and through the next bead. So I'm going over 2 rows. It can get a little difficult. If you can't get through 2, take them one at a time. So I'm going through the first bead. Again, my thread's running down alongside and into the gutter there, so you won't see it. I'm going to come out one more bead below that. And this is not magical. I'm just following a zigzag pattern to work my way back up without seeing the thread. That's all. There's nothing written down anywhere that I've seen this. So now I'm going to come out here. And because it's half steps, you just kind of have to work your way back and forth between them. And then this will come up alongside of that bead. I'll come out through that bead. And again, you won't see a trail of my thread on the outside. You just see beads. And I'm ready to add the next row. In this case, I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads. 1, 2. Oops, excuse me. I spent a good deal of time trying to figure out how to film this. My son has a friend who got some GoPros at the holiday when they were on sale. And because of the price they were on sale, he went down and wanted to buy several of them. And they said, oh, you can't buy that many at this price. And he said, why not? Well, they hadn't said there was a limit, so they had to sell him as many as he wanted. And then they redid the ad. But I'm going to ask my son, if he said to me one time, why aren't you filming with GoPro? And I said, well, we don't often have the need for that. So hopefully he might still have one. If he talks to his friend, I can get one for the occasions where we try this. It'll keep me having this big gooseneck sitting over the table that I tend to bonk while we're working. Again, now I'm going to come down. I'm going to go at an angle through that bead and the next bead. bury that thread, come back up, one bead, come back my half step, and I'm ready to go out that top bead again. Always want to say ta-da, like magic. Ivan, that's Daddy. We're fine, thank you. Everybody's home right now, so sorry for Ivan's comments. He heard Rick out in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4 beads. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 beads to add. And you can see we're doing this at a direct correlation, up a row, down a row, and as many beads across. Not sure why, but my phone says I have a low battery. Okay, so now, whoops, I missed that when Ivan started talking. Let me back that up. Go through that bead. 2 more. One. And 2. And again, I'm going to go down at an angle across 2 beads. And then come back up 1 bead. Over. I think I may have come through that thread. Yeah, I think I did. If I can get this back out of there without causing a problem. Can. Can't tell if I actually split that thread, but it looks like I did. So I'm going to take this thread off and bring that back out, because that will not lay the way I want it to if I have it split there. It'll cause a scene. I went and had my eyes examined a week ago. It was the first time in quite a while. And I was a little surprised when they told me that my vision had improved. It didn't feel that way while I was stitching at all. In fact, I'd been clipping on higher powered glasses and using my magnifiers, stand-up magnifiers. And it turns out that my glasses, my last pair of glasses, were actually, the prescription was too low in my bifocal, but higher than it needed to be in my distance, because I guess if you are actually nearsighted, that tends to happen as you get older. Your vision, your distance gets better. So they increased my bifocal section and decreased my, and decreased my farsighted vision. Anyway, haven't got the new glasses yet. We'll see how they work when they get here. Now I'm going to put in 3 more beads. We'll get to the top here quickly, and I'll show you how we add the lobster clasp and the top of our decorative beads. I did notice that you can see the thread on the one spot. I missed a step in my beads. I would back that out normally, but I just don't want to take the time to do that right now. Getting close to everybody's meal time. Everybody meaning Ivan. Okay, now we're down to our first bead. So I'm going to, again, slide down here, come over a step, come back up one. The nice part about this demonstration is I can do it for you, and then you can stop it and start it anywhere you want to, as many times as you need to see something. So here we are at the last bead. And after I add this bead, I'm going to bury that thread a little bit again. Come across. Yeah, I come to this side. And here's where I'm going to go up to add the top of our fob. The beads that I'm going to add there. I'm going to just reposition this a little bit. The light in the room has changed. I had to move that a little bit. Now these are going to be our fringe and our top. The top is going to be these larger 3 beads that I pulled out. I like those. And then our clasp. So you start with the bead you want at the bottom. Actually, I'm going to turn that over. These bicone beads, to me, I don't know if it's my astigmatism or the bead, but it always looks to me like there's a pointier side and a less pointy side on these larger ones. This one looks pretty even both ways, actually. And then my green bead. That's pretty even. Just slide those down. That'll be the top of our fob. Add your lobster clasp. And I'm going to just go through here a couple times. Then I go back down through those beads. Right down through all 3 of them. 1. Easier said than done. It's hard to do in an angle that you can see it at the same time I'm doing it. So let me see if I can do it this way. Okay, 1. 2 and 3. And now I'm back at the actual fob. And here's where I like to see where I came up on the one side. So I'm going to go back through from the opposite side just to balance out how it hangs, which means I want to go through here. I'm going to angle down through that side, come out down here. I just give it a little bit of an advantage of how it lays that way, and it doesn't favor one direction or the other when you pull it down. So it comes up on the left of that bead, goes up through the clasp, back down, and in through the right side of that top bead, and then I anchor it down through the top. And then at this point, it's a matter of just zigzagging this thread back and forth through several beads. I took it down through 3. Now I'll come up from here. I'll come up a row and go back across a couple beads. And then I'll go back and forth. And you can bury this any way you want to. And then, when you've got it wrapped around in there a couple of times, you can actually even just kind of put your bead needle down between the beads till you come out between one row of bead fabric or thread that runs through. Make a loop, draw your bead loop through there, pull it nice and tight and anchor it down in, and then you can snip it off. And that's a pretty good anchor right there. It may be overkill, I don't know. I just started doing it this way to make it something that I knew wouldn't work its way loose. You can probably work your way back and forth between a series of 1 or 2 beads. The only thing is, if you do it through the same beads too many times, it gets very dense and it makes it hard to work through. After I've done that, I sort of roll the beads around a little bit, even out the string tension so there's no buckling or anything that's visually noticeable. And that's done. Now you have your clasp, your beads, and your fob. And now we're going to look at the options for some fringe. I'm going to use that same thread I had already loaded on this needle. And I'm going to start by kind of coming in here and giving it a little bit of an anchor. Whoops. I came in just in an angle through 2 beads there. You can see my thread. And now I'm just going to go back through 2 beads. Come down and do it again. And then come up 1 row and go back on itself. And this should pretty much pull that tight. If I pull it tight and it doesn't give, I've wrapped it enough times. So now I'm down, let's see how far down I am. I'm down 1, 2, 3, 4 rows from where I want to start my fringe. So what I want to do is come up here to where I'm coming in from this corner. So I'm going to come into the side of the bead here. So I want to come up here, go out through there, and come back in and ready to start this first leg of my fringe. So I'm going to come up from where I'm at. I'm right there out of this bead. So I'm going to go to here, travel back through that bead, I'm going to want to come up and go back down a row. Again, I'm doing this to keep the thread hidden. And I'm going to come out here. There, and now I'm going to come in this side. So the only thing I've added that's even visible is this last little loop on the corner here between these two beads. Now, I can see that that's a little bit loose on that side there. So I'm going to go ahead and come back a couple of beads and anchor that, make it a little bit taut, draw that bead in. I don't like the way it was hanging, and then come back again. Oops. And work my way up to that corner one more time. So now it's snug. This last bead is nice and snug. It doesn't move on the end. And it'll be a good basis for my first leg of my fringe. Now, again, there's directions, and I'm sure everybody does this differently. I'm going to show you. This is one fringe that I put together as a possibility for what I want to add to the bottom of this piece. It just uses some of the colored and background Delica beads mixed in with these bicone beads. Sometimes they're angled and they're shorter on the outside, longer in the middle. I think what I want to do this time, just for a difference in effect, and because it's triangles, I'm going to make it hang at an angle where it's longer on the outside and shorter on the inside. So my first leg is going to look very similar to this. I'm going to put on a bicone bead, a few Delica beads, bicone, Delica, and then as I go, I'll drop the number down. I'm going to start with, I think 4, then I'll go 3, 2, 1, and I should be high enough in there with my beads that that middle row will be kind of interesting to look at. I've dumped out my bicone beads here on my tray. And I've got some Delica beads. Do you need to go out? Sorry, Ivan's right here at my tray. There you go. Can you go through? I'll open the door for you. There you go, buddy. There. We just let Ivan go out. Okay, so now here we are. And we're going to do a couple of rows of fringe. And again, you can do your fringe any way you'd like to. I'm going to add a few beads to my tray so that I can play with these and mix them up in any fashion I want to. I'm not going to use the salmon color in my fringe. Just going to use those colors there in my background color. Mostly because of the bicone colors that I have here. I just kind of like the looks of that. Now I'm gonna pull the beads off of here, so I have those back to play with. Yeah, we're set to string our beads. There's only one thing you need to know about doing this fringe, and that's that you come back through after anchoring it on the bottom so that they don't fall off the end. So start at the top the way you want them to go down. I have a very small bicone bead up here that's clear, and I'm going to start with that one. And then I'm going to go let's go to an opaque green. No, changed my mind. I think with this one, no, okay, I'm going to keep it that way. I'm going to keep the outside ones a little more opaque, and then that center one is going to be more of the sparkling crystals. So we'll start with the clear one, the opaque green. We'll pick up four of the green beads. That's what it looks like so far. Then I'm going to add an opaque blue. Pick up four of the blue background beads. Then I'm going to pick up this opaque pink and pick up this. I think I'm going to pick up the purple against that. Pick up four of those. And at the very bottom, I think we'll put on what will we put on? How about the larger clear crystal? Now, once you've loaded your last bicone bead or Delica bead or whatever bead is your last bead, you need an anchor bead. I could use that as an anchor bead, but my thread's going to show the whole way up around, and I don't want that. So I'm going to pick up a background bead to use at the bottom as a stop bead. You put that on, and then while it's on, you go right back up through your beads. The only caution is make sure that you do have a bead on the bottom before you do it, because you'll just pull your thread right back out of all the beads that you've already loaded. So I'm going to stop it here where I can get that needle. I've lost my reach. So I got all the way up through the green Delica beads to the bottom of the opaque green bead with my backtracking. I'm going to find that set that out of the way, the stop bead that I put on there, and draw that up. And now you'll see how that works against the bottom of the fringe. See, it just acts as a plug on the bottom. What I like to do, I'll finish out this fringe. Come right back out the top. And at this point, I like to take a hold of this and just kind of set it sideways to the bead so it crosses the bottom of that. There you go. Now, that's our first leg of the fringe. You can take it right over and go into the next one. I have a tendency to go over and then come back up and around because I like to tighten that a little bit before I move on. Then all the weight of your beads isn't hanging just from one thread to another. So I go just in a V. I go across and then I go back across into the next channel to do the next one. So you'll see that. It just hangs a little bit nicer that way. So there's my first string of Delica. Make sure that you've got enough play in your thread so that those Delica beads don't kind of stack up on each other wonky. You want them to hang nice. There you go. That's my first one. Now what I'm going to do is on my next two, I'm going to drop a bead from each of these. So now I'm going to go down to 3 beads in each of the colors and keep the sequence the same. So I'm going to pick up one of those small white crystals. Then a green opaque. 3 Delica beads. A blue opaque. Three Delica beads. A pink opaque. 3 purple Delica beads. A larger clear crystal. And then a background color bead. That's my stopper bead, so I run them all up. And you'll see they're a little bit shorter. Slide it up where you can see it. They hang a little bit shorter than the previous. And I'm just going to move this aside. So you can see I run my needle right back up through the line of beads. I'll come out here, draw it up, and then I'll finish traveling back through. Go through. Sorry, a little bit clumsy there. Go through these 3, back through the opaque, back through the crystal, and now out into the next channel. Look at how that hangs. Admire our work. Now I'm going to just take this up and anchor it again, like I said. Go up across 2 rows. Give it a little bit of play. Then I'll bring it back and out that side. And I'll be ready to pick up the next one. Now this one again, I'm going to drop 1 more bead. Now we'll be down to 2. So I'll pick up the small clear crystal, the green opaque. Now we're playing with 7 strands of fringe here. So I have enough to do 6 with the opaques. And the center one is going to be all sparkle. And I'll show you, I just think it kind of appealed in my mind to a change in my fringe. So I've got my green, now I do 2 green opaques. then a blue, and 2 blue Delicas, as you can see. Then I go to my pink again, my sort of opaque Delica pink, and purple. If I can see it, I can do it. And then the large clear. And a background bead. And we only have one more fringe to do, and you will have seen the whole process. This one again, I'm going to run this back through. I don't go through the Delica bead, I go through the crystal. Then again through the Delica beads there. Then through those 2 Delica beads, through that opaque, and through that crystal. Now you can see we're short enough that I can get it through all in one run. There's our 3rd and 5th fringe. So we've done all the fringe that you're going to do coming into the center. You'll repeat this if you do it the way I did it, or you can use your own pattern. So this goes longer, step up, step up. This will be my middle and last different row, and then I'll repeat these 3 on the way out, and that will be our entire scissor fob. So on this center one, I want to play with the concept of doing it all in these bright sparkly ones. So I had pulled those out. I need 3 of these for the last 3 clear fringe pieces. I need 1 more clear one. There we go. So those 3. Oh, that one's still not clear. That one's opaque. I know there's another one somewhere. There we go, I think. Anyway, those will go on the last ones. This one, and this one. The last 3, along with these. And then the sort of pink opaque. There, that's our last. And the large clear. There's 2. I may need to retrieve 1 more clear large one for my last. But now what I want to do is play with these brighter, clear, non-opaque. I could substitute that if I really got lazy. Oh, there we go. There's the 3rd one. All right. Tra-la. Okay, so now for this center one, I have some smaller ones that are very pretty, and what I thought I'd do is start with the clear colors. Are these all clear? No. Okay, you go in there and you come out of there. There. Okay, now I have 3 clear for the back 3. Okay, so let's pick that one up. That one's a little opaque, and that's okay. So we have a green, an opaque. Let's pick up a blue, and then maybe this sort of light purple. See what those look like next to our other ones. And this is our middle piece. That's what we're looking at here, is what that looks like. So, oh, I'm sorry, look there. I didn't go back through on my fob. So I need to take those back off. And go back into that next spot. Okay, so let's try that again. Clear. Green. Pink. Blue. As a top. And I'm thinking of just letting this be one row. I don't know if I want this dark one on there to be the main bead in the middle or not. Let's see. No, that's too dark. So we're going to back off of that one and put one of those larger opaque beads in the center, I think. But first, I want to pick up one of these really pretty blue ones. See how long that hangs. Because if this hangs down in the right place, I may not go too much farther. See where that leads to. Huh. That's close. So maybe a couple more, and then we'll have that lined up. See if we can back that out and repeat that pattern a little bit. And then the green. And then, the clear. It's Ivan's dinner time, so Rick's gonna feed him. Thank you. It's nice to have a puppy dad around. Okay, so there's our crystal. If I use the smaller ones, I like that look a lot. So that's where we're going to stop it, right there. We're going to make that our center. And actually, I think we're going to end as I look at this, I'm thinking I'm going to drop this last clear crystal. I need a stop bead on that. And this just about comes even with that third row. So I don't really want to do that. So let's take that off. Put on a background bead. Then come back through our crystals. And we are almost there. Okay, so now I'm going to draw that through. And we'll slide this up. I might want to snug that up just a little bit more. There we go. And then one more pull on that. There's just a little out. Now what I want to do here is I want to anchor that a little bit, come back through those two. back through 2 more, and then be ready to go down and out through that section. I have to come right around one more time after I've snugged that up. Okay, buddy. Yes, time to go potty, isn't it? And 1, 2. Down through here. There we go. Oops. Hey, honey. He rang his bell. Go see Daddy? You take your potty? Alright. And there you have it. Now you've got the fringe. And you'll finish it the same way I finished these first 3, only in reverse. And that is what I do to make my scissor fobs. A little bit of a mess on the tray there. I hope you can see the majority of this. Like I said, I don't have a tremendous amount of equipment for filming. If you would like a PDF version of that pattern, just send an email to our Country Stitcher email address. It's listed in the information box with this video. So will be the list of all the things that I used in order to complete this. And Deb and I will see you with our next video. I hope you have a very pleasant Easter. And remember to share the joy of needlework. Thank you. Goodbye.